Welcome everyone to this fireside conversation with 3 previous podcast guests and a small audience, live audience from the Never Done Before community. I have here with me Pauline McNaulty, Jules, Gilleland, and Lily Higgins. And we all spoke about play in some shape or form in our previous podcast recordings. And today we'll try to combine the uncombinable. And maybe you'll tell me it's not so uncombinable after all. We'll talk about play and conflict in the context of group work and facilitation, of course. And maybe we can kick it off to hear from the 3 of you. What do you mean by play? And Lily, I can see you leaning.
I was like, who's gonna go first?
You.
What is play? Okay, so play in my book is, at its essence, it's pure exploration for exploration's sake. And it's also, well, I often go towards like trying to describe the feeling when you're playing. And I think there's this feeling of being in a flow that is really, it's very specific to play. I always associate play and flow together, as well as the idea of emergence. So when you're playing, you're exploring, you're in flow, and you are interacting with what's emerging, and doing so in a usually light or curious way. And you'll notice that this is a very broad description, because I think that play can be so many things that I don't like to kind of box it into, oh, like it's playing a game or being playful. I think it's really, play for me is a way of interacting with the world in the ways that I described.
Thank you, Lily. And I could see Pauline and Jules nodding. Pauline, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Did you say Pauline or Jules?
Do you want to go first, Pauline?
I'm relaxed. I'll go. Dive in. Thank you for having us. And I guess for me, I completely what Lily expressed makes sense. And to build on that, we see it as kind of a verb, like, and that verb can be anything that you find deeply enjoyable, where you lose that sense of time and you're naturally drawn to kind of spend your time doing that thing. And also on top of that, it's that mindset of how, that kind of point of how Lily's phrased it. I loved it, in interacting with the world, but a kind of a mindset of curiosity, that moment of presence, and a way of navigating the world in terms of through experimentation and learning by doing, and being open to seeing what happens and never quite knowing, but also enjoying the not knowing, because it's play. And I guess the emotion that I most personally associate with play is wonder. And people often say play and joy, and I feel like that doesn't, joy is part of wonder, but wonder is kind of a lot broader and includes kind of curiosity, contemplation, surprise. So you can kind of have this sense of growth and learning through the emotion of wonder. And I think particularly as adults, it's that sense of play doesn't look like one thing, it doesn't feel like one thing, and that breadth of experience is what makes it magical for humans.
Thank you, Pauline.
Lovely. Yes, going last, I feel like I can just combine the two. I always identify the two words that you've both used, curiosity and wonder. in my playful work. But definitely when I'm discussing with adults, we have to change the mindset, because we've been taught to separate work from play, and many adults have just forgotten how to do it. So we have to broaden, like she said, we have to broaden the whole scope of what the word means. And a lot of times I even bring in, does anybody do a sport? Because that's also play, but they don't connect those two, right? But when you're doing a sport, you lose track of time and you're enjoying yourself and you're using your whole body, which is another really big part of play, I think, is using your whole body, not just your mind and sitting at a desk. And also all the senses. I like to try to think about, this is one of the ways play is different than work, is that many times it involves all the senses when we're doing it. So I think definitely we need to change the mindset and combine them, the two. Maybe work more than conflict, I think. It's hard when I try to go directly from mixing play and work to mixing play and conflict. That feels like a bit far away, but hopefully by the end of this, we'll have it all sorted. So, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for putting the next brick there on our way between from play to conflict, or use play for conflict, use play for work, in work. How do you approach that? And I know that I discussed this topic with the three of you already in the individual podcast. So maybe just a nutshell for the audience to catch up. How do you use play with your clients? To play at work or to work through play?
I think I would go back to the idea of helping people notice what there already feels like play, but they put the label of work on top. So I always use the example of an actuary lost in having all the benefits of play, solving a problem. It might look quiet, it might look kind of solitary, but they are having all those benefits because they deeply enjoy it and love it as much as they might do a Sudoku in their own free time. And that's why they're drawn to do that work. But it's kind of just an unhelpful label sometimes that we put across a set of activities that we do that we get paid for. Obviously, in the context of work, there's things that we don't enjoy and which are part of the package. So it's not that we can enjoy and play 100% of the time in our work, but it's about sensing and noticing what elements are there already, what can we build on, and in the context of teams, building that awareness in leaders and individuals to say, this is play for me, this is play for you. How might we play together more by having this increased awareness of these individual play preferences? And then I'll stop there, but then you could also go into the mindset piece of how you approach solving problems, which is a second piece.
I love that. Like the way that you're sort of integrating play and work is like, how can we actually see things that we're already doing as play, or like reframe them and kind of like breathe that like life back into them. And the way that I'm working, I think the most with play is as a learning experience designer, which is my role, I'm often working with teams who are having some kind of challenge. And usually they're going through a moment of change or a moment of transition. And in some shape or form, there's resistance to change, or resistance to transition, or maybe there's tensions within the group, as there is in every team, because this is normal because we're human beings. So the way that I end up using play most of the time when I'm really designing these experiences for teams is, first I need to understand where the resistance is. And I need to understand sort of where where some of those obstacles are that are standing in the way of where this team wants to go. And once I know what those are, I like reverse engineer my experience that I'm designing to specifically play with some of those obstacles. So, for example, if I know that maybe there's like a very strong power dynamic in the team, where there's maybe one person who's taking up a lot of space or a lot of decision-making power, maybe I'll play around with the roles of people in the team for that one session and say, okay, you have now a quote unquote high status role in this team. You have a different status role in this team, and sort of switch that up and see, let's just do an experiment. Let's just see what happens if we do this brainstorm or this discussion, and just play around with the rules a little bit. And it's always framed as something temporary. So, this isn't forever. This is gonna end after a few hours. You can go back to the way it was. But that's a reflection that I've had in the last few months with my own sort of creative process as an experienced designer and facilitator, is that play in my work is almost always used to help people move through difficult things. So in a way to disarm people and to disorient them just enough to kind of get us to the next step, or to kind of imagine another way of doing things.
Yeah, I think it's going perfectly around, because a lot of what I do is also about the challenges that they are facing. And sometimes those are pretty serious, and they really don't believe that the process of play will ever solve that problem, because it's too serious, and we've been talking about it for months and we've never found a solution. And so yeah, my process is also trying to really dig down and find the foundation of that challenge, what is really the problem. And then I create a sort of an action question or prompt, I'll call it, like build a barrier to communication in your team, or the motivation in your team, or something like that. And then I only give them the found objects to solve that, or to actually define the challenge. So they use the objects to define the challenge that they're facing. And this is a lot about related to, I think, Einstein, who said you can't solve a problem in the same way that you came to it. So, these business teams have this problem, and then they're using bullet points and sticky notes and conversations and words to try to find a solution. And I sometimes talk about it as like someone's broken the front gate, and everybody is standing at the front gate trying to fix it in kind of the same way that it was broken, by pulling on it and all of this, while one person sort of walks around the back, through the garden, looking at the trees. It takes them quite a while, and then they all of a sudden are standing on the other side of the gate, and they've had a really lovely journey on the way. So I think that for me is how play is very, very powerful in solving these challenges. And pretty much every time I've done it, they've come up with lots of new solutions that they have never thought about. And that's because they haven't ever thought about it in that way. They've always tried to go at the problem in the same way that they came to it. And when I was preparing for this, that was my thought about how I think play and conflict can work together, or how my way of working with teams through play solves conflict. I think it's very much that way, is that it's a completely out of the box thinking, and like you were saying, it's taking them out of where they are, out of their comfort zone. They don't feel comfortable at all when they don't have paper and pencil in front of them, and they only have funny little objects. But at the end, they have a lovely journey. So I think that's the key.
What I find fascinating is that you all use play in very different ways, but it seems that there is a general thread. And so whether you use objects or something tangible to induce play, or you change the rules of the way we communicate or interact with each other, or you just put a different label on something that we are doing anyway and call it play. These are very different angles to actually come to the same thing. And I also hear that from what you explain, that getting a group of, air quotes, serious people to play means taking them out of the comfort zone. And conflict is something also very outside of the comfort zone. And I think it was Pauline who said that we have to think of the different mindset and interpretations of play. So how comfortable does someone feel in play? What is the concept of play we grew up with? And I think the same applies to conflict. So how can you then actually get a group to feel, not only to lean into the discomfort of play, and then use this discomfort of play to lean forward even deeper into discomfort of conflict? Or is it like mathematics that the two negatives cancel each other out and suddenly they will actually thrive and feel very comfortable?
I think the resistance to play, whether it's or the discomfort towards play, I sort of always, quote unquote, solve it in a similar way. First and foremost, you need to understand the team that you're working with, because there's also a really large spectrum of the culture within a team and how receptive they're going to be to different kinds of play. So there is no one size fits all play solution. And there are some exercises that I would never ever do with some groups. Just knowing like, this is not going to land with these people, and I'm not going to force them into that deep end today. Because there has to be an opting in. And that is the most like critical element, at least for me, in my work, that I always start with sharing about the magic circle, the place where play happens. And I say, this workshop is going to be a magic circle, and you're going to have the opportunity to step into that magic circle in a minute after I describe to you what we're going to do today. And this is completely up to you. And if you are ready to step into the magic circle, please feel welcome. And if you need to step out of the magic circle at any moment, you can do that. And I'm not going to ask questions. We're not going to judge each other. And this just really making sure people know that they have full autonomy in this situation is so important. And it's also something that I see a lot in workplaces, that people's autonomy is like slowly kind of taken away in a lot of situations. And so really placing this back in people's hands and saying, I cannot force you to play, because if I force you, it's not play. So if you want to do this because you're here and you're ready and you're saying, let's explore, and you know that you have an out. So I would say that's kind of like my secret to, it's not a secret because I tell everybody when they ask me, how do you get people to play? I'm like, well, you give them the choice.
And how then to step even further to conflict? I see Jules's.
Yeah. No, I think definitely creating a safe space where they feel they can share or not share is super important when you're asking them to take this big leap away from what they've actually been taught is not the same. Work and play don't go together. And so I think creating that safe space is really important. And then also I believe very strongly in how my secret sauce actually is in creating the environment that they walk into, so that when they walk into my workshop, it looks nothing like their boardroom or nothing like a facilitation room, or there's no flip charts, there's no overhead presentation, there's no bullet points anywhere, there's no sticky notes anywhere, there's only hundreds and hundreds of little objects. And I think that's my sort of dipping their toe in. So not asking them to jump into the pool immediately, but just dipping the toe in. They always believe that they are snacks. So they run up to the tables and think that I've provided lots of really beautiful, beautiful little snacks. But and then they get curious and start touching them. And then I normally start slowly as well. I start with little icebreakers that they can do or not do. And truly, actually, I have to say, I haven't really had anyone opt out the entire workshop. Normally, people are a bit hesitant in the beginning, but by the end, I always say this a lot of times to my groups, the one person, normally a man in a suit, but I'm not going to be sexist, but anyway, who's looking at his watch and super frustrated that he's in there and has other things to do, and bought his laptop in his bag actually, so that he could sneak out and do work instead of play. That is normally the person that's on the floor when I'm ringing the bell and saying, okay, this session is over, and he's like, no, and 5 more minutes, I need 5 more minutes, because he's trying to build a tall tower, or I don't know what. So I think that's always really funny to me. And it's helpful that I have done it for so long that I don't get scared to death of that person in the beginning of my session, because I'm like, oh, they're gonna hate this, but yeah, they end up loving it. So I think that creating a safe space and allowing them to start slowly, because they aren't used to this. So yeah,
I would agree with all of what's been reflected. Our Wonder Dates platform matches people for virtually facilitated micro moments of play, and that's all been designed with the kind of intention of it being low stakes, a short time, and people are kind of invited to have one of these Wonder Dates and meet another person for a moment of connection and creativity. So that's kind of that opt-in there. And then we've also built in an opt-out in the moment, where people could say, here's the exercise, actually, it's beyond my comfort zone. And what we've seen is people do take that option, which, you kind of contemplate, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's just what, it's safety and how someone feels. But what you do notice is when you're looking across an organisation or different organisations, to Lily's point, the creative risk appetite or the play appetite, people stepping into these spaces will vary and be different, and that will be dependent on the context, how it's framed, the role modelling, are other people stepping in or not. But I think it's about, what we're trying to do is create more and more of these moments where people have a moment of discomfort, get used to the discomfort, and realise, actually, oh, I did learn something. I might not have enjoyed 100% of it, but I got the opportunity to notice, learn something about myself or about the other person. And, in terms of our theme of conflict, the benefit of these things is that people are connecting as the human behind the colleague. And the more and more we can see each other as humans behind colleague, the kind of the titles, the roles, I believe and sense that this will be the shift that we need in corporate cultures for conflict navigation to come from a different place. because we are connecting and navigating this as humans rather than this is the title and the hat that I've been told to wear. I've been there, I've done it. That you show up differently, but given opportunities to put aside the titles, the roles, those constructs, people still have that capacity and actually are crying out for it, but they just need the prompt and the space and the invitation to step into a moment of play and creativity.
So if I understand correctly, then play is a means to flatten the hierarchy, to bring the human forth. And Lily at the beginning said that play is exploration for exploration's sake. So there is no agenda in play. But then if we use play for actually flattening the hierarchies and for creating a safe space where conflict can maybe addressed or hopefully even resolved, suddenly there is an agenda behind the play. So how do you bring this together, especially when these dates are actually not wonder dates, because these people, maybe they don't want to play with each other?
But I think it comes back to, I believe play can be purposeful. Well, it always has a purpose, because the purpose could be just the experience itself. And if you think about a game or a sport, there is an objective and an aim in mind. I guess where it sits on and the type and nature of that purpose can vary, and that's fine. It's all about, comes back to what is we always live in our separate realities. And so if our experience is play and there is a purpose attached to it, I would never deny someone that experience. And I know that I can be achieving and aiming for a particular purpose, and I can go on a playful path or a non-playful path or somewhere in the middle. And actually it's about, for me personally, is about opting for the playful path because it's way more sustainable, way more enjoyable. But that's kind of a learning process too, or a unlearning and relearning process on how to do that. And all we can do is set up the playground, or whatever form that might take for any of the others, send out the invitation, and then see whether people want to step onto that playground. And if people say, actually, I go on a wonder date and actually it wouldn't feel like play for me, that's absolutely fine. That's their experience. And, I feel like that would still be a learning about what is my playground and what are the environments where I find those moments of connection, joy, curiosity, etc.
Coming back to nobody can be forced to play. Jules, I saw you nodding.
Well, I just think that all of us would love to see play and work, completely combined and the mindset changed, where play is not a bad word in the office. But I think the reason why each of us actually isn't doing, as we had said before, exploration for exploration's sake, and sort of making a little bit of a purpose or a goal, is to kind of dip their feet in the idea of play at work and how important it is, and how it can increase their innovation, it can increase their problem solving skills, it can increase their wellness, all of that. But if you do it just pure exploration, then it's just a fun away day, and they could have gone and done paintball or something. I think the idea that well, anyway, I have a feeling that we're all trying to change the mindset that play is not only good in work, it's actually really, really vital in today's world, that people play at work and solve problems that way. So yeah.
I think I should have been more specific, Miriam, in my definition, because I think when you asked to define play, I defined free play.
Okay.
And free play is total sort of exploration for exploration's sake. But what we are all really doing is applied play. So we are taking that essence of play, but then of course we're doing it for purpose.
Yeah.
And so I've just been thinking a lot about when we talk about play and conflict, I think there's a lot of different ways we could actually pick that apart, because you could think of a scenario where you're bringing two people or multiple people who actually have conflicts with each other and trying to facilitate a kind of playful conflict resolution. I think that on the intensity scale of 0 to 100 would probably be 90. But we can also think about playful scenarios where we're not necessarily working with people who have direct conflicts with each other, but let's say we as a group, and assuming we have no conflicts with each other, we said, hey, we really want to get better at being in conflict as a skill. So let's explore that in a way, a kind of neutral group, even though it's not, and no group is ever neutral, but knowing that there aren't specific conflicts between us. And I was speaking to a facilitator yesterday who was using an amazing way to do that with forum theater, also known as theater of the oppressed. And she was guiding a team who were having conflicts with their manager. And so the manager was not in the session. And how they did it was having an actor so there was the actor and the facilitator, and the individual, the participants who were having the conflict, first they would describe the whole situation. This is the conflict. This is the kind of person I am. This is who my manager is. So the actor could kind of learn what the situation was. And then the actor and the facilitator played out that conflict. So actually the participants just watched. And the actor represented the participant whose turn it was, let's say, to see their conflict played out. And I think this is a really interesting stepping stone, because the participants were not forced into probably a pretty scary situation of having even to play out, role play out that scenario, especially if you're not an actor or you're not used to that kind of interaction. But their invitation was that they could stop and start the actor at any time. So they had a kind of control.
An agency.
They had agency. They were definitely a part of it, but they weren't in the sort of hot seat. And then in the second half of the session, once everyone had been able to see their conflict kind of from the outside, then they were invited to actually step into the shoes of themselves. So then they played out that conflict, and they had essentially a conversation with this manager who was being played by the facilitator. And the invitation was, you'll probably never get to have this conversation in real life. So just have it. Just say what you need to say. And I can imagine this is extremely cathartic. And also, as someone who's participated in forum theater before, even not in a team setting, but wow, just using your body to literally embody conflict and power struggle. is so powerful to just start to kind of relate to it in a different way. So that's kind of one scenario.
Yeah.
And then what got me really interested in this topic of play and conflict was joining a training about live action role play. And I see Miriam like,
yes. Yeah, because I can see that we're adding now, we're now drifting in the role play, which is again a different form of play. And from what I heard, the three of you sharing is not the kind of play that you would facilitate in your sessions primarily. So I would like to stay maybe in this in the realm of the facilitation tools that you actively apply, so we can speak about your experience. And I would like to just double check, because from what I understood from you, that play is then actually only for the good times, and maybe I'm just exaggerating a little bit. So we can play out conflictual situations that are not there, but then using play in conflict for conflict resolution maybe is not so possible.
Well, I have something, because I do think, I mean, in what you were talking about in the role playing, the conflict, and then what people watching. This is when you first asked me to do this, I was thinking of what would be a workshop that I've done that fits this bill actually, and I have a really good example, and that is I did a workshop for a team building for a large government institution, and their problem was, their challenge was, there was a huge disconnect between the upper management and the rest of the staff and the public, because it was a public government institution. So not only in physicality, because the upper management was way up at the top of the building and had their own cafeteria and their own coffee place, and never came down to mingle with the other staff or the public, and the maintenance people were in the basement and never came up, and so this was a real problem. And also the vision was very, very different of what the kind of education staff wanted for the public, and what the director, primarily was the director, that was the biggest problem, to be honest. So I was brought in, and the question that I asked was, will the biggest challenge or the disconnect in your team, where is that disconnect? And so they worked on that. The director wasn't there in that particular part, because then they wouldn't have been open, wouldn't have been a safe space, because they needed to talk about him. But the fact is that they defined the problem very clearly, and most of them were, the bottle tops were all the upper management, and they were on the table, and all the lambs and the little animals were off the table on the floor, and there was only this flimsy string attaching the two, and there was no connection. And then after that, when they felt really comfortable, then they came up with solutions, and that's when the director came in. And it's a bit the same as your acting, because he was listening to their solutions, which hinted at the real problem. But the real problem wasn't really him. The real problem was the green bottle top that was sitting on the top of the desk. So he didn't really, he knew they were speaking about him, but in fact, they were targeting their problem at this object, not him. And the other upper management, and they came up with super cool solutions. And the solution was actually to combine the lunchroom and the coffee area for everyone, so that the maintenance came up and had lunch. He had to come down and have lunch, and they all sort of had lunch together. And I think that that's a way, again, that play, whether it's role play or or any kind of thing, or object play helps in conflict is that it removes the finger pointing. You are the problem, actually, or the name calling, or any of that kind of thing. And so I think that for me, anyway, in what I'm doing, play is very, very important to solving those conflicts. Yeah.
And I saw a similar comment in the chat by Anushka, who was wondering whether play is a tool or approach to lower the stakes of a conflict. Did you have this similar thing in mind, that it actually deviates the focus from the person towards an object, as Jules just mentioned, or maybe a playful scenario, as Lily explained?
In my case, it absolutely removes it. I mean, if they choose a lion to represent the director and all the lambs to represent themselves, it already says a lot before they even explain what the problem is. Or if they choose a giraffe and put a big wall in front and said, okay, this is the only person who can see anything that's going on, and the rest of us are all stuck behind this large wall with no view of the future, and no view of the mission. Again, visually, it's very, very clear what the conflict, what the problem is. And they don't even really have to use very many words, and they definitely don't have to point fingers and name call at all. So I think it does, for sure, diminish the conflict or the stress of discussing it anyway.
I think there's this disarming or sort of diffusing quality to play. And there's this quote that I always think about from Emily Dickinson, the poet. And she said, tell the truth, but tell it slant. And she kind of goes on to talk about like that people don't really do well, like being faced so directly with quote unquote the truth or the hard facts. Like in the case, Jules, I love this example of like, they're talking about the director and he's in the room, but he is a bottle cap or he's a plastic animal. And you're talking at the plastic animal and not at the director himself. And there's something about that I just thought of an exercise I did with a team using Troika Consulting, which is a super well-known like facilitation, sort of like liberating structures format. And just by having the team, I think I made them like speak in like the third person or something. Like there was this kind of like distancing, and that's kind of what play can do. There's this like playful distancing from maybe the pain or the sensitive parts of that interaction. And because it's play or because it's an exercise, everyone's like, okay, haha, like we'll play along for now. And yeah, kind of allow that distancing to happen. And therefore like open up space for different possibilities and different ways of talking, and less hopefully being what's the word, like defensive. So my goal is always like, can we use play so that we bypass like a defensive response to really just like get to the heart of the matter.
I'd love to hear from Pauline and how she relates to that, and then maybe from our audience.
This is super, like lots of insights and reflections are occurring right now. So I'm just kind of processing in terms of what I've noticed is that, we're probably more like in terms of facilitating these moments of kind of creative connection and using play at the heart of that, more in the prevention of conflict rather than the resolution of conflict. And the kind of play as a tactic or a strategy to help resolve conflict is, I guess, what we've been reflecting on. And I feel that is great in, you know, when that's needed for certain types of conflict. I think at the heart of conflict is that this people forgetting that we all live in a separate reality and people have different experiences, and there's a set of facts and then there's stories around those facts. And the mindset that enables us to have successful navigation of any conflict is curiosity, and not necessarily holding our own story so tightly, and being open to different possibilities around the story, around the facts. What's your story? What's my story? What's the new story? And I feel, you know, whilst we're not kind of in direct conflict resolution, it's kind of going back to this point of helping people remember that we're all humans, and this is we've all got this inner capacity to connect and to understand and empathize with other people. And particularly in a work setting, there's more opportunity for us to be curious around what's your experience, what's my experience, and look at things more lightly, rather than it being kind of so fixed and binary. And so it's that kind of mindset that we're trying to nurture over time.
And as you mentioned mindset, this was also the word that popped up in my mind when I listened to you. And when I get it correctly, it's basically the way using structures or tactics to get the group into the mindset of play that will then also enable them to step into a conflictual situation better. Because the mindset of play means, as you said, curiosity in one hand, but then also opting in, wanting to be there, having the option to opt out, and defining the ways how we interact. So I find it fascinating that actually the mindset that we need to resolve conflict is the mindset that we're using in play. And I see all the hands in our audience going up.
Yes.
So Eva and Anushka, what comes up for you? Eva.
First, thank you. It's so interesting, like different angles. I just love this. So thank you. You know what I wanted to say, and a little bit, because Lily at the beginning in our 5 minutes, I had a peek preview of what she's doing. She mentioned how playing to learn, but it's also conflict. And she mentioned animals. For example, cats, you know, it can seem quite rough, and actually they may be chasing each other and stuff. And what came to mind, and what I've, you know, working with leaders, is just this tension or conflict between work and play, because as I see play as well as, you know, doing something with no expected outcomes. And in a work environment, you actually do have expected outcomes. You know, there are sort of expectations. And then the level of risk. So there is this conflict in itself, yeah? And what I ask people always is just like, so what, you know, what's the playground? Where is it safe enough, you know, and it's linked to the business. I don't do, I mean, where is it safe enough that they can play? And then it's low you know, low risk for their success. And then exploring these spaces for themselves, and then as a team, it immediately loosens up, because the risk, you diminish the risk of, you know, we're not going to succeed, or if I don't get this, or if you don't give me this, then I cannot do that. And so it's almost like exploring this playground space, if it exists, and it always does, at least a little bit. And then people immediately engage in a different way. It's not even sometimes about personality or personal tensions, you know. So this is what came to mind when we were And I never thought about it like this, about, you know, sort of, yeah. So this was this is me. And, you know, thank you for, it's very interesting to hear what you're doing now.
Just a reflection, thank you, was that what came to mind when you were talking was that we only suffer when our expectations and reality are different. And that in itself is a conflict in terms of
Yeah.
we have all of these expectations and we hold them so tightly, and the art of life is how to have these goals and these expectations and aims, but not hold them so tightly that we can then enjoy the experience and recalibrate when we have this difference between the two.
Yeah.
I think also just briefly, that it's important, again, what we keep saying is mindset, but it's important again to teach about play at work, because a lot of, I mean, even when we define play, we define, like Lily said, open-ended play, or, you know, just play. But what we're discussing and what we do with business teams is applied play, as she said, and that means that we do have objectives, we do have a goal. We don't necessarily know what the end result will be at all. Actually, we don't know at all what the end result would be, but we do have an objective, and we kind of, you know, guide them there through our questions, and the materials that we give them, or the activity that we give them, and then it's up to them or the group to get to that, to their own result or their own goal. And many times I give exactly the same question and exactly the same materials to different teams, and the result is so different. Not even in the same room, this group over here has a completely different result than that over there. But so I think that the real key here when we talk about conflict and play, or work and play, is that idea that it's not completely open-ended. It definitely has a line or an objective that we're trying to follow. But also, I don't know about Lily and Pauline, but I mean, you have to be a very flexible facilitator, because in the middle, they could not be into it at all, and you have to completely pivot and give them something else, or ask them a different question, and to get them back on track again, or just go with them in that direction and see what happens. And so I think that's I don't know, my take on that.
In order to facilitate play, you also have to be playful yourself. I think
Yes.
that's what I hear you saying, and it's so true. And if you are serious and stiff, then it's very, very hard to, because you're role modeling. And so if they see you kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go in this other direction, then they're more willing to take that risk. And I loved what you were talking. I love that you brought in risk, Eva, because I think that's one of the other things that play helps us do, is to diffuse a sense of risk, or even like explicitly, like in workshops, sometimes I'll say like, okay, for the next 2 hours, there is no failing. Like, you're not going to be graded on this. This is not going to have ripple effects back out into the office. Like, what you do in here, it's going to end. Like that magic circle idea, that it's this finite place. And that helps people to just let go a little bit more and say, okay, if I couldn't fail, if failure wasn't a negative thing, then what would I do? And that helps people to, again, tap into that playful way, exploration, curiosity, and yeah, face risk more head on without the fear of messing up.
It goes back to that kind of point of, I was a chief risk officer in my corporate career, and the
Oh, ironic.
this yes, from chief risk officer to play, but this idea of like, what are our expectations around a range of scenarios that might happen, and think this sense of what's a good outcome versus bad outcome, and what's our expected range of outcomes and which one's acceptable or not. It goes back to kind of, I think sometimes our stories around what's good and bad are quite limiting. And so it's completely understandable that we have people in organizations who have a fixed view, not any fault of our own, like this is how we go, like of what's the most desired outcome, and then we kind of hold on to that. So I love this idea, maybe as you're kind of talking about, like kind of proactively helping people understand that, you know, this in this space, that you know, the scenarios all are welcome.
Yeah, I think it's also that getting back to that safe space is when I begin a workshop, I always talk about that extra points are given for cheating, messing up and failing. So, you know, so just give it a go, because if you, and I love when people cheat, you know, I say you can only choose one thing and then they hide 3 other things behind their back. And so I think it's really great. And that idea of through play, actually failure is a great thing, because if you've explored and you're curious and you tried something out and you realize it didn't work, then your mind starts going at how can I make this work? Whereas if you just stay safe and you do everything that you know is going to work, then you don't really learn anything new at all. So I think it's really important, again, when you're making that safe space, to explain that failure is a good thing in that sort of playscape or playground, as you said. So,
and I guess the ultimate aim we're talking about is making a whole organization a playground, where it's not just the domain of these workshops, but we have a clear purpose, an objective, but there's a playground which enables that learning and iteration and sensing and emergence.
Yeah, where it becomes part of the culture and the sort of way that failing, for example, is not only accepted within this workshop, but it's also celebrated or accepted or acknowledged in a certain way all the time.
that is our ultimate. When we're doing a workshop, is that they continue it back in the office, you know, that it's not just a day, that it changes something.
And I wonder whether the ability to play and the ability to have conflict are actually similar ingredients for a thriving organization, where we also learn through conflict. And conflict is important for an organization to grow, because it's about looking at different perspectives, also negotiating different points of view. So I wonder how then this brings an entire new perspective to the interplay of play and conflict. And I saw Anushka and Eva's hand up, so maybe we start with Anushka. And we lost Lily, and back she is.
I'm back. I froze and dropped out for 1 second, but I'm back.
I think there are similar organizational skills, but because, I mean, for me, play is an approach to conflict because it allows me to process conflict in a different way than it's normally processed. Like, we engage with conflict on an intellectual level and on a verbal level most of the time. Sometimes we go emotional, but that's already weird at the workplace. But what play does for me is, like, I can take it to the body, I can take it to touch, I can take it to whatever other way of processing that situation. And as an organization, to work with conflict is also is a processing of different parts coming together that don't work, and we need to find a new process how those 2 parts can go together. So if as an organization we embrace play, we enable more of this processing power, I think, because we learn how to process things, not just verbally, not just intellectually.
It's problem solving. I mean, that's how children learn. You know, they play and they problem solve. And I think that the same thing happens in business, that through play we learn how to solve problems better.
And there's boundaries. Set boundaries. Eva?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, adding on a little bit to what we were saying, you know, you create this playfulness in a workshop, but do you follow through as a process? Do you know what happens afterwards? So is it sometimes a process for you, or is it like this sort of experience in the space you create?
I think for me, I will say I work primarily with the European Commission, and I would love for it to be a process. I would love to go in and see that they have put things in their boardroom and in their meetings. I don't think it's really happening. I do get asked back to do workshops with the same teams, but my ultimate goal is that it does change something that they do when they get back to their office. But I don't know if they do actually.
I guess
Yeah.
what we've just, oh, sorry, Lily, after you.
Oh, I was going to say the same thing, that it's really my goal this year to be involved in more long-term culture change and change management processes. And that also means partnering up with more people who are guiding a change management process. And then I would be also like one piece of that, because I feel right now in my kind of individual capacity as being a facilitator, my work happens in that magical space that I create for teams. And then I might have a check-in with them a few times in the coming months, but I always have the feeling like, I really wish I could work on a longer term, more systemic process with them. So yeah, that's something I also really sort of have dreams of doing, and finding the right collaborators to make that possible.
I guess in terms of the Wonder Dates platform, what we've designed, it's designed to be systemic and social and super simple. So it's embedding these moments in the rhythm of work, creating a ritual where people meet one or more times per week for just 12 minutes to have this moment with a warm-up, creative exercise, warm down, while they're having their coffee break. So it's more embedded into what they're doing. So this is this kind of facilitation, but it's virtual facilitation. We're still kind of gathering the data around what's happening, but it's about creating a practice and a ritual in an organization. And that was born out of when we did workshops, we sort of saw great things happening. And there's amazing workshops out there, but we were thinking, well, what's the yes and to that in terms of helping nudge behaviors on an ongoing basis and support people in that behavior change, as well as kind of having the high touch, high impact interventions. And I think, you know, the future is this combination of highly skilled, highly kind of in-depth for tricky, sticky topics like conflict, where, you know, our micro intervention is not suitable. However, it's a building on in terms of, well, how might people explore like the themes that have been covered in a particular around values or in a workshop, and continue that journey. So there's the sense of continuation and weaving it into the fabric of an organization. So I think there's lots of possibilities for collaboration with lots of people. I love what you're saying, Lily, around like there's so much work happening around the future of work and how people are shifting, changing things, and it's a puzzle, and every organization is going to have a different puzzle, and like these different tools and techniques will help guide people to the right answer.
Because I do journeys with teams, and then I see playfulness almost like a side effect of them becoming a better team. And so it's a privilege, because I do it like 6 to 9 months, and then actually, because you're seeing them and you're seeing the change of behavior, it's almost like, yeah, playfulness is the outcome. And it's not necessarily sometimes in the moment of intervention. Sometimes we're not very playful because there is tension and you're working on things. Sometimes we are, yeah, but so it's interesting. It's almost like conflict and then playfulness, it's the other way around. And
I can totally see that though, because you've kind of like moved through all the phases of like whatever model you use, norm, storm, perform, or whatever, like you're in the perform part. And that is when a team can actually play together is when they are at their most high performing, because they are able to essentially take risks together without feeling like they're going to be judged or like beaten down by their team members.
And again, it reminds me to what Pauline earlier said, that play allows you to see the human in the other person, because you're suddenly at the same eye level. And this awareness that we are with another human is so necessary to actually work through conflict. Not to fall into the trap, to lose respect, or to finger point, or to look down at someone.
Yeah, there's so many threads. Like we've talked about, like play as a mindset, play as a tactic, play as a strategy, play as the result, play as Trojan horse, play as diffusing mechanism, play as metaphor, play like it's it's kind of it's no wonder that when, I guess I'm sure that people in this call can relate, like when you sometimes talk about play with people who aren't like deep in this topic like we are, people are like, what do you mean by play at work? And then in my mind, all of these things that we just talk about like explode in my head. I'm like, there's so many different different angles, different threads, different ways, different. It's hard to pin it down into one thing, because it's like, to me, it's like a way of existing in the world. And that's, yeah, it feels very big to me. It's very, very deep. And I think when most people use the word play, they use it as something kind of like light, frivolous,
for children,
kind of for children, whatever thing. So I'm really happy that we've kind of like dug into at least 10 different angles in this conversation about what play is and what it can do. And yeah.
I think that hearing you say that, I realize it's really hard for me to sell what I do, and for people to get on board with it. And what I just want them to do is just, try it, because once they're in the middle of it, or even at the end of it, they see the value. But listening to you and how big and how many different threads there are to play, this is why it's so hard for me when somebody says, what exactly do you do? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you want? Actually, mainly that's my, what is your challenge? Let's start with that, and then I can choose which thread that I tell you about. Because if I just start talking, then you're going to be like, wow, she's a bit wacko. And I think we'll go ahead and do the guy who does flip charts and sticky notes instead, because that's too far. That's too far. So.
Yeah, it's very broad and complex on one level, and I also see how it's sort of super simple in terms of it's when we're fully alive, and that's when we can perform at our best, and it's a very natural human quality and form of expression. And what that looks and feels like, because we're complex systems, every individual are all different and unique, it's inherently becomes you're trying to describe something intangible. And so I really like, and we found, Jules, as well, the same, is that what's the outcome you're looking for? And is it like, for us it's like happy high performance, navigating change and feeling fit for change, which is like there's a marathon out there at the moment of change. So how do you create the conditions within any individual, any team or organizations that any people are more likely to thrive and do their best work? And so it's kind of getting back to this kind of sense of, when do humans do their best work, or be at their best? Maybe not work is superfluous there.
And then it's basically play as a sort of vehicle, or even a dojo, where we are learning life skills and to perform better, going better through change or conflict or whatsoever, high performance. Basically bring it back to the essence, how children learn through play and how animals learn through play.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we design for this learning journey through play? That's what I'm taking away from this conversation. And we have 9 minutes left, and maybe we can have a sort of check out with, what are you taking away? What's your little harvest? I would love to hear from the panel, and also invite our audience to check out with your takeaway.
My takeaway, well, I really love the way that you summed it up, Pauline, that play is both very deep and also very simple. And it is about feeling more alive, full stop. And that conflict and also things that we might experience as quote unquote negative, they are also a part of feeling alive. Because if we are only in, like, there is no sunshine and rainbows forever. Like, we learn some of the most profound things through our darkest moments, through conflict, through all kinds of things. And so to me, what we are all talking about is using play in order to kind of, in order to experience the full spectrum of life and to be present with that, and not only be present, but to kind of, like, I imagine just like surfing the waves of life, like play is the way that we can keep changing, keep finding joy, but also testing ourselves, but also failing, but also like a full spectrum of things that we might consider positive and negative, that make us feel alive and that help us grow and learn.
I think the two things that I've taken from each of the other discussions is, one, this whole idea that play shows us the human in our colleagues, which I see really often. I just haven't really put that into words, and that's really lovely. And then also the applied play. I've used that in other ways, but I haven't ever put them together. And I think that's another really great definition that I'll take away and use, because again, the whole idea of just the word play people have all kinds of associations with that, as we already see here. I mean, we have all kinds of different associations with the word play. And I think that, I mean, this is something that I truly believe, but I see it now definitely in seeing the different ways that you all work with play, is that really I haven't found anyway, one thing, one challenge, one issue that play can't solve. And I kind of talk to people about think with things, which is what I do, can be used in any time that you think about using paper and pencil. So if you're going to give your team paper and pencil to solve a problem, or to have a discussion, or to brainstorm, or write a story, or any kinds of things, you can use play instead. And it just takes a bit of coming up with the right questions and facilitation, but definitely play, for me anyway, it can be used anywhere in the workplace.
I think for me, this has just been a lovely reminder of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that, this is play for me, like this exploration in itself. Intellectual exploring is my way of play. But it's beyond intellectual, it's visceral, emotional. And this sense of we're designed to play, and it's like the most natural way to be and build resilience. And the corporate systems, a lot of different systems that we have and operate within, aren't designed to enable us to be playful and be naturally resilient. So we have this innate capacity, and it's there resting inside every single person. We just need to invite it back out. And I feel like all meeting and conversation and like this, of people inviting it out of humans and reigniting it, is just super exciting. That there's kind of this wave of work or play happening. So that's what I'm taking away.
Anushka and Kiana, what are you taking away?
Like a specific thing right now.
No need. Thank you.
For me, it's like kind of like it being, I don't know if reminder is the right word, more maybe a reinforcer of how daring you can also be. Like, I love, Jules, when you were like, oh, I remove everything that's typically in the workshop room. I take it all away. I take them the markers away. I take them the flip chart. I'm like, that's actually daring. I really like that. And that in combination with this magic circle idea from you, Lily, I really love this idea. Like, this is this finite place where we can go in, and there's the play magic happen, but you can go in and out as you feel safer and braver to do. And I think in the combination, it's really nice. Like, yeah, okay, be but daring by really making this an explicit space where the familiar things are missing, but then it's still making it a space where they have agency over their participation.
Eva?
I will just quickly say what I loved is just this different, how, different approaches to play, and then how we linked it to conflict. And then it was, resolving conflict through play, but also then first conflict, then play. And it's almost like this, I have a little playful to end up with Jules is I have little, shell. It's almost like a Fibonacci, it's endless. But going, expanding. So that would be it.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for playing together and with the maybe uncombinable play and conflict. It's been a treat.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.